In the early 1930s, Germany was already rebuilding weapons it was not supposed to have. Versailles had banned tanks, aircraft, artillery, and more, yet under cover programs the work went on. The problem Germany feared most was in the sky. Aircraft had proved their worth in the First World War, and by the 30s, bombers were climbing higher and carrying heavier loads. Rifles and light anti-aircraft guns could not answer that threat, so German planners wanted a fast, hard-hitting gun that could reach high-altitude bombers before those bombers reached German cities. Only 1 in 5 Flak crewmen would survive the war. The same weapon would also become a nightmare for tanks. Its fire control system was far ahead of its moment. This is the story of the infamous 88, born as an anti-aircraft cannon and feared far beyond that role. Krupp engineers were given brutal requirements: high velocity, quick handling, and enough reach to fight the new bomber threat. After repeated failures and fixes, the result became the 8.8cm Flak 18. Flak came from the German word for an anti-aircraft gun, and the word soon took on a life of its own. The gun fired shells with time fuses, set to burst at a chosen height and throw steel fragments through aircraft formations. A direct hit could destroy almost any plane then flying. A near miss could tear open a wing, smash an engine, or rip through a cockpit. The carriage was just as important. Its cross-shaped platform let the crew swing and elevate the gun fast, from -3 degrees up to 85 degrees. That also made ground fire possible. The weapon weighed about 7 tons, needed a crew of 10, and could be towed by truck or half-track. That mobility mattered because Germany was building its plans around fast-moving war. In an emergency, a trained crew could even fire the 88 while it was still on its wheels. But the human cost grew darker as the war turned against Germany. Flak units increasingly drew on older men, wounded soldiers, boys, and women, especially in communications and radar work. More than 1.2 million people served in the Luftwaffe anti-aircraft defense arm, almost half the whole force. Before that grim expansion, the gun had to prove itself. A small number went to the German Expeditionary Force in the Spanish Civil War for combat testing. The results impressed the High Command. The 88 was soon judged the best anti-aircraft weapon available, though no one yet understood how many jobs it would be forced to do. Spain revealed the first twist. When aircraft were not the target, the 88 was aimed at almost anything that needed braking. It hit bunkers, infantry positions, and most importantly, tanks. Armour in that period was often thin enough that a high-velocity anti-aircraft round was devastating. Then, with the wider war beginning in 1939, the picture changed. The gun received armour-piercing ammunition alongside its time-fused and impact-fused shells. Germany entered the Second World War with just over 2,600 flak guns, twice the British total, while America had almost none. German planners had guessed correctly about the need for heavy anti-aircraft fire. Over the war, Germany would build about 21,000 88s of different versions. The crews paid for that usefulness in blood. The Flak 36 refined the weapon for hard service. Its barrel was split into replaceable sections, so worn parts could be changed more easily. A new cross-carriage made deployment faster, and a steel shield gave the crew some protection from bullets and fragments. The barrel grew longer, and a larger propellant case drove the shell to even higher velocity. Then came the Flak 37, with improved aiming gear and a data transmission system that could feed target information from a central fire control unit straight to the guns. For ground targets, crews also had a direct sight, but against bombers, the real edge was the linked fire control network. Rangefinders, sound locating devices, and later radar feeding a mechanical analog computer. That computer did the hard part. A command crew tracked a bomber stream, estimated speed and altitude, and sent aiming data to every gun in the battery. The crews were not aiming at where the aircraft were, they were aiming where the aircraft would be when the shells arrived. At high altitude, a shell could take more than 20 seconds to reach its burst point. The fuse had to be set so it exploded at the right moment, close enough to spray the target with fragments. The Allies later used proximity fuses, which transformed anti-aircraft fire and guarded them closely. Germany never fielded an effective version, so the 88s kept relying on time fuses. Time fuses were imperfect. Bursts could come short or pass the formation and explode too late. Allied radar countermeasures and jamming made the problem worse as the war went on. The average number of shells needed to bring down one bomber rose from about 4,000 to about 16,000. Even so, Flak never became harmless. It shot down hundreds of Allied aircraft, killed thousands of aircrew, and forced others to bail out over German-held territory. The danger ran both ways. Allied forces hunted flak batteries whenever they could. The 88 had a muzzle velocity of about 820 meters per second and could reach roughly 8,000 meters vertically. On the ground, the same speed gave the 88 a flat path and excellent long-range accuracy. Its semi-automatic sliding block breech helped it fire up to 20 rounds a minute. After each shot, recoil opened the action and kicked out the spent case. When the loader pushed in the next round, the gun could be set to fire as the round seated. Each 88mm shell weighed just under 10 kilograms, with about 1 kilogram of explosive inside a steel body built to fragment. The black bursts over bomber formations marked that explosive filling. Around each burst, roughly 10,000 fragments could rip outward, dangerous across about 10 to 15 meters. Aluminum-skinned bombers had armor only around vital areas. Crews, fuel tanks, engines and hydraulic lines were exposed. Later, 10.5 and 12.8 centimeter flak guns fired heavier shells, 15 and 26 kilograms, with far more explosive. But how did an anti-aircraft gun become an anti-tank sniper? Over Europe, German air defences often had little to shoot at, because the Luftwaffe still held the sky. But the 88 found another job. When French Char B-1 tanks or British Matilda II infantry tanks appeared, the usual 37mm and even 50mm anti-tank guns could barely hurt them. So the heavier guns were dragged into the fight. At Arras, Erwin Rommel's 7th Panzer Division was hit by a sudden British armoured counterattack, and his light panzers began to give ground. Rommel answered by ordering every gun he could find to drop its barrel and fire straight into the oncoming tanks. The result was brutal. German crews had just proved that an anti-aircraft weapon could be a first-rate tank killer. Its high muzzle velocity, flat trajectory, strong optics and accuracy suited the open desert perfectly, and soon mattered on the Eastern Front too. Armour-piercing Panzergranate 39 and 40 rounds followed, with explosive filler for damage after penetration. At 2 kilometers, they could punch through about 100 millimeters of armour. Then came the shock of heavy Soviet armour. German anti-tank guns struggled, and the 88s were pulled forward again. Early on, they were, for a short time, almost the only reliable answer the Germans had, but the crews paid for that fame. Once the guns became obvious threats, fighters, bombers, tanks, snipers and infantry all hunted them. Firepower alone was not enough. The weapon needed armour and mobility. In effect, the anti-aircraft gun became an anti-tank gun, leading to the redesigned 88 fitted to the Tiger I in late 1942. That is why the Tiger's 88 became one of the most feared guns faced by Allied tank crews. The same family of ideas then pushed into tank destroyers such as the Nashorn and Elephant, which carried the more powerful Panzerabwehrkanone 43. The vehicles themselves had reliability problems, but the gun's reputation was fearsome on both sides. With excellent optics, it could destroy Allied tanks from distances where many opponents had little chance to answer. It did not save Germany from defeat, because the war was being decided by far more than one weapon. But in recorded actions, it tore into Allied armoured columns. By 1943, the air war had also turned against Germany. The Allies were running around-the-clock bombing campaign against key industry, while civilian areas were hit too, whether by accident or design. Anti-aircraft crews now lived under constant pressure around the most valuable targets. Then came flak suppression bombs, time-fused cluster weapons meant to burst over suspected gun positions. Those bombs were designed to shred exposed crews and equipment. Fighter bombers added strafing attacks, and casualty rates in many batteries climbed to between 50 and 70%, even higher in the last desperate months. The gun positions themselves were often improvised, hurriedly dug in, or simply left in the open as the front moved. Some, though, sat inside concrete emplacements, and that brings us to the flak towers. These were vast, fortified anti-aircraft platforms, but also shelters for thousands of civilians during air raids. A gun battery, a bunker, and a fortress were fused into one structure. They are often overlooked, yet they were among Germany's most heavily fortified and technologically advanced defensive works. 8 major tower complexes guarded Berlin, Hamburg, and Vienna. Each tower used reinforced concrete walls around 3 meters thick, supposedly strong enough to survive direct hits from 500-kilogram bombs. Inside were floors for ammunition, medical areas, supplies, and shelter space. Their heaviest batteries included 4 twin-mounted 12.8 cm guns, supported by 88s plus 37 and 20mm automatic cannon for low-flying fighter bombers. The firepower was immense, but it could not seal the sky. There were too few towers, and Allied formations could often route around them. When the war collapsed, the Flak towers became last-stand fortresses, among the final positions to fall. Some survived into the present, and a few have even been turned into museums visitors can enter.